In February 2022, something happened that most people didn't fully understand. Western leaders announced they were cutting Russia off from SWIFT. The news anchors called it a financial nuclear bomb. Economists said it was unprecedented. Russian banks scrambled. The ruble collapsed by 30% in a week. And somewhere in a basement in Belgium, in a town most people have never heard of, a small team of technicians flipped when amounted to a switch. Not a metaphorical switch, a real one. Digital, yes, but real. And just like that, the 11th largest economy on Earth went dark. No bombs, no troops, no declaration of war, just a message that stopped appearing on screens, a code that stopped being recognized. And suddenly, a country of 140 million people couldn't send or receive money from most of the world. Here's the uncomfortable part. That same switch exists for every country, including yours. Most people assume money moves through wires, that it's pushed from one account to another like water through a pipe. That's not how it works. Modern money doesn't move, it messages. When a company in Germany pays a supplier in Japan, no cash crosses borders, no gold changes hands. What happens is a message, a very specific, very formatted message gets sent from one bank to another, instructing them to adjust their internal ledgers. Bank A says to Bank B, "We owe you less now." Bank B says to Bank C, "We owe you more." And the whole thing happens because everyone trusts the message. The system that carries these messages is called SWIFT. It stands for the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. It was founded in 1973 by a consortium of banks who wanted a standardized way to talk to each other. It's not a bank. It doesn't hold money. It doesn't approve transactions. It's just a language, a postal service for the financial system. Except it's not neutral. SWIFT is headquartered in La Houppe, Belgium, a quiet town about 20 kilometers south of Brussels. The campus looks like a corporate retreat. Glass buildings, manicured lawns, the kind of place where you'd expect management seminars, not geopolitical leverage. But this sleepy little campus is the backbone of global trade. 11,000 banks in over 200 countries use SWIFT to move roughly $5 trillion a day. That's not a typo. 5 trillion every day. Without access to SWIFT, a country can still do business, but only with partners willing to work around the system. And most aren't willing, because using SWIFT isn't just convenient, it's the signal that you're inside the circle, that your money is real money. Lose that signal, and the world treats you like you're paying with monopoly cash. Now, here's where it gets interesting. SWIFT is technically a cooperative. It's owned by its member banks. Its governance board includes representatives from multiple countries. On paper, no single nation controls it. In practice, that's not entirely true. SWIFT is incorporated under Belgian law. It operates under European Union jurisdiction. And critically, because most of the world's major transactions still settle in US dollars, every message that touches the American financial system falls under American oversight. This means Washington has leverage, not total control, but leverage, enough to pressure the cooperative into compliance when it matters. And compliance has become a recurring theme. In 2012, SWIFT cut off Iranian banks under pressure from US and EU sanctions. Iran's oil exports dropped by half within a year. In 2017, North Korean banks were expelled, and in 2022, Russian banks followed. Each time the pattern was the same. No invasion, no shots fired, just a quiet decision in a Belgian boardroom, and suddenly a country's financial oxygen supply started thinning. So, does it work? That depends on what you mean by work. Russia's economy didn't collapse after the SWIFT ban. It contracted, yes, inflation spiked, imports dried up for a while, but the country didn't fall apart. Why?
because Russia had been preparing for this since 2014. After the first round of sanctions over Crimea, Moscow built its own messaging system called SPFS. It's clunky, it's limited, but it works for domestic transactions and for communication with a handful of partners. Meanwhile, China had been building something similar called CIPS, designed to handle cross-border yuan transactions. After 2022, the two systems started talking to each other. And that's the unintended consequence nobody in Washington wants to talk about. Every time the SWIFT switch gets flipped, it teaches the target country a lesson, not just about vulnerability, but about the value of alternatives. And it signals to every other country watching that this could happen to them too. Here's the irony. The power of SWIFT comes from universality. It works because everyone uses it. It's trusted because it's everywhere. But every time it's weaponized, that universality erodes. Countries that never considered leaving the system are now quietly exploring backup options. Central banks that once held mostly dollars are diversifying into gold, yuan, even cryptocurrencies. The global financial architecture that took decades to build is developing cracks, not from external attacks, but from the tool being used too often. It's like a homeowner who installs a self-destruct button in case of intruders, then keeps pressing it every time the neighbors get loud. Eventually, people stop wanting to live in the neighborhood. And this raises a question that policymakers are only beginning to wrestle with. What happens when the switch loses its power? Right now, cutting a country off from SWIFT is devastating. But in 10 years, 20, if enough alternative systems mature, if enough trade starts flowing through CIPS or SPFS or whatever comes next, the leverage disappears. And it doesn't just disappear for the sanctioned countries, it disappears for everyone. The US dollar's dominance isn't guaranteed by law. It's not carved into stone. It's an agreement, a habit, a collective decision by the rest of the world to keep trusting the system. And trust, once broken, doesn't come back easily. There's another angle to this, one that gets less attention but might matter more in the long run. The existence of this switch creates a kind of paranoia at the highest levels of government. Countries that fear being cut off start making strange decisions. They hoard gold, they build redundant systems, they sign currency swap agreements with rivals. They invest in financial infrastructure not because it's efficient, but because it's defensible. That paranoia reshapes alliances. It changes how trade deals are structured. It alters the calculus of war and peace. Because now, when a country considers defying the Western order, the first question isn't, do we have the military strength? It's, can we survive the blackout? And the second question is darker. What do we need to build so that we never have to ask that again? So, here's where we are. There's a system most people don't know exists. It's controlled, more or less, by a small group of wealthy nations. It can be used to punish enemies without firing a single bullet, and it's already being used. But each time the switch gets flipped, the world takes note. And slowly, quietly, the alternatives grow stronger. The fragmentation accelerates, and the very tool that made financial dominance possible starts to undermine the architecture it was meant to protect. The quiet switch is still powerful, but it's no longer quiet. And when everyone knows where the off button is, they start building their own walls. The question isn't whether this system will be used again. It will. The question is what happens when the countries being threatened stop fearing it, and the countries watching start preparing for their turn.